This is episode number 714 with Bournemouth University PhD student Tim Albiges. Welcome back to the Super Data Science Podcast. Today I'm joined by the remarkable Tim Albiges. Tim was working as a restaurant manager 8 years ago when he tragically lost his sight. In the face of countless alarming and discriminatory acts against him on account of his blindness, Tim taught himself Braille and auditory learning techniques and to raise math equations and diagrams using a special thermoform machine so that he can feel them. And he did all this in order to be able to return to college and study computing and data science. Not only did he succeed in obtaining a bachelor's degree in computing with first-class honors, he is now pursuing a PhD at Bournemouth University full-time, in which he's applying machine learning to solve medical problems. His first paper was published in the peer-reviewed journal Sensors earlier this year. Today's inspiring episode is accessible to technical and non-technical listeners alike. In the episode, Tim details why a career in data science can be ideal for a blind person, how he's using machine learning to automate the diagnosis of chronic respiratory diseases. He talks about the techniques that he employs to live a full and independent life with a particular focus on the AI tools that assist him both at work and at leisure. And a keen athlete, Tim fills us in on how he's adapted his approach to fitness in order to run the London Marathon and enjoy a fascinating team sport called goalball. All right, let's jump right into our conversation. Tim, welcome to the Super Data Science Podcast. It's awesome to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Where are you calling in from today?
From Bournemouth in England,
Ah,
southeast.
yeah. I've never been to Bournemouth, but I'm well aware of the Cherries, the
Oh,
football
yes.
club there. Yeah,
Yeah, the
they've
football
had,
club,
yeah,
very popular with the locals.
yeah, they've been tremendous in recent years, I guess. And yeah, it's quite a shame that I haven't been down to Bournemouth because I lived in the UK for 5 years, but it's right on the water and it's relatively
Yeah,
warm for England, right?
7 miles of coast, beach.
Hmm.
Beach.
Sounds nice. Yeah, so we got to know each other through you being a student on. So there's this. A lot of people are aware of the Open Data Science Conference. So they run, as far as I'm aware, the biggest conferences in North America in this post-pandemic world for data science.
Yeah.
So there's ODSC West in San Francisco. There's ODSC East in Boston. There's ODSC Europe in
Europe,
London. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
London.
Have you gone to the London one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I've watched some of the episodes online, but I haven't
Hmm.
actually been up there.
Yeah, yeah, and they have an Asia one that's in India as well. So they're all over the shop with these in-person conferences, but they also have a digital platform called AI Plus. And I've done a number of trainings in AI Plus and had the trainings recorded in there so that people can view them later. So my whole math for machine learning curriculum. So there may be some listeners out there who are aware of how I started posting a couple years ago linear algebra videos and then calculus videos, and then I started the probability videos, and then it just kind of abruptly stopped. So on YouTube and Udemy, I have this math or machine learning course where it's very very tightly edited, but then I also have just this live training that I did for AI Plus on math for machine learning, but it actually covers the whole curriculum. So on YouTube and Udemy, I need to get back to this really tightly edited curriculum. Um, but so there's kind of this, if people want to have access to all of the content that isn't yet on YouTube and Udemy and that I haven't published in over a year, it is all in the AI Plus platform. It's just that it's not, I just did it in one shot in a live class. Um, so yeah, maybe a little bit rougher around the edges. But in addition to that
I would
math for
definitely recommend it though.
oh, nice, yeah. And in addition to that math for machine learning course, I also have a deep learning course, which is, I don't know, there's probably 15, 20 hours of deep learning content. It was kind of six, 3.5 hour-ish lectures. Maybe they get edited down a bit because there's breaks and stuff. But yeah, so you did that whole deep learning curriculum as well. And I
Yes.
and I think after you finished that course, you reached out to me on LinkedIn, kind of added me on LinkedIn. And yeah, then we were connected for a couple of years and we hadn't chatted until a week ago at the time of recording. You wrote a post on LinkedIn that really moved me. I thought it was a really special thing to read. And so now we're going to focus on that kind of for this episode. So tell us about what happened 8 years ago, Tim.
So 8 years ago, I had a big bleed in my eyes, which took most of my vision. And at the time, I was working in a bar restaurant. And when it actually happened, I was actually at work when I had a bleed, and I was just about to use a till, and I started moving towards a till to try and read what was on the screen, and I ended up banging my head against it because I just couldn't see.
Oh my
It just
goodness.
faded out. So that's left me on a journey of learn, learning and redirection and everything to where I am now.
Yeah, and you've managed to do really impressive things since. So things like running the London Marathon. You ran the London Marathon in 4 hours and 45 minutes, which is faster
Yep.
than most people, I imagine. And yeah, I mean, these kinds of things, obviously, to like run a marathon, you're dependent on a running guide.
Yes.
So things are a bit different. And how does that? And yes, I mean, let us know kind of how that works. So how do you, when you train to run, is it like sometimes on a treadmill, or do you often have a running guide for training as well?
No, I had the same running guy for training as well.
You keep each other fit.
Yeah. Well, he was used to running marathons. He's done like all the 10 top marathons in the world. And so he loved running. And yeah, we just trained to do the mileage. We trained to get into sync as well. There's a lot
Right.
of he needs to be slightly ahead of me, but not too far ahead so that I can understand what the ground is because I can't see the ground.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so
Oh, so you can tell by
so
how
you
he moves in front of you, whether it's going up or
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Oh
we have a
yeah.
little cable between us holding on. And then yeah, we feel so much of each other running and
Hmm.
yeah, it really kept me going at a time when I needed to.
And so fitness and IT were two different kinds of career options as you started to. So what were you doing before the blindness started?
So I was duty manager of a bar restaurant.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
so that explains the till that you were describing.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so then with the blindness coming on, you looked at fitness and IT as two different kinds of potential career paths, things that you were interested in, and how did those discussions go?
So what I try to do, I try to find other visually impaired blind people in those industries.
Hmm.
I spoke to people in fitness, mainly because I love being outside running and enjoying the outdoor activities and everything. And they were explaining how, yeah, they're all qualified, they're all good, they have their regular customers, but trying to find new customers or get employed in gyms, very challenging. And their work wasn't always continuous. Uh, but when I spoke to people in IT, most of those were self-employed, similar like fitness people. However, a lot of their clients didn't know they were blind, and they didn't inform them or tell them or anything. They said, "We just get the jobs. We know what to do. We know how to do it, and we get it done." And they were always so busy that they always had more work than what they needed to, really. And
Hmm.
so I thought that would be a good option to go into.
Yeah, that does. It sounds like it was the right choice, but in the beginning, it wasn't easy. So you wrote in the
Mm.
LinkedIn post that battling to keep your job was a struggle that seemed never ending. You faced countless setbacks, laughter, hung up calls, and interviews canceled when you turned up.
Yes.
One company wanted to see evidence of what you could do without your sight, but you wrote triumphantly in this post that you left those companies in your wake as you
Yeah.
keep growing and move on. So yeah, I don't know if you have a little more color that you want to add to those kinds of circumstances. I mean, it's crazy to me that in these modern times that there'd be that kind of blatant discrimination. That this was kind of I mean, it sounds like from this post that was kind of the norm as you were going to
Yeah.
interviews and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It really did feel like the norm. I would go to, yeah, I went to different job interviews, some were on over the phone. Um, but when I turned up, even if I let them know I was visually impaired, I didn't tell them how much.
Hmm.
But they would turn around and say, "Oh, the position's been fulfilled." Or if it's on the phone, they would say, "Oh, you're blind." It's like, "Yeah, and I'll need certain adaptations." They're like, "Oh, don't worry," then hung up. Um, and yeah, some would laugh. Then at other interviews, they would be more interested in me being blind rather than actually interviewing me for the role.
Hmm.
So I had all these barriers and challenges. So that's when I really thought about, yeah, why not retrain, move on, and go for bigger and better? Because a lot of these jobs were secretaries, these um, these roles, and just sales on phones and everything. So I thought, why not push and go further? So yeah, I went back to college and faced another
Yeah.
type of challenge of learning via audio instead of visual.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So you returned to college to study computing.
Yes.
And yeah, you had to shift from visual to audio learning, which would have been super taxing, I imagine.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and then you mentioned to me before we started recording that you also learned Braille, which comes in super handy for people like data scientists because,
Oh yep. For helping me to debug.
yeah.
Um, um, Doing it via audio, I didn't find it as accurate, and I was also advised it wasn't as accurate.
Mhm.
Um, and so I learned Braille, and yeah, it really helped me to debug if I had accidentally hit a space in between certain variables.
Right.
You could pick it up a lot easier on the Braille display than on the audio. So that really did help.
And so you have like a special keyboard with Braille on it for typing or
No, no. Luckily, when I was 18, I used to stay up all night in a dark room, just touch typing. thing. So, yeah, that's why
Okay.
all the old IRC chat rooms show my age.
Uh,
Um,
so then the device that you showed me, it's not a keyboard,
oh,
it's for reading Braille.
I use it mainly for reading. You can type on it,
Yeah.
um, but that's still a skill I need to really develop a bit further. I can very slowly type on it, but no,
Right,
the
right,
quad
right.
was a lot quicker for me.
So how does that so for most of our listeners are in an audio only format. And so they wouldn't have seen the device that you just showed up on the screen, but it looks like it kind of looks like a keyboard.
Yeah,
But then it also has like five big blue buttons for each of your
yeah, it
fingers.
has eight large, big blue buttons,
Oh yeah.
and that's for typing in Braille. Then you've got the space bar under the cursors for your Braille display. On a Braille display, there's cells of eight dots.
Oh, I see. I see. So the eight buttons correspond to the eight dots. So you type
Yes,
in Braille. It's not like it doesn't try to emulate a keyboard like a traditional keyboard like the one that you've been typing on for years and years, but you actually print like you yeah, so it's almost
type
like
in
it's like
Braille.
piano chords where you're like so it's
That's
not
right.
one key at a time. You're like, oh, okay, this kind of chord represents the letter A and this chord is the letter B.
Yes.
Oh, cool. And then so for reading, so then the kind of the display on it, it just I guess like it changes the touch. It has like the eight things go up and
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Each cell has eight little dots, and they go up and down depending on which letter
Hmm.
it is
Cool.
or symbol.
Yeah, so basically between these two things, between audio and there's something that it became obvious to me just as you and I were setting up to do this recording when you're, switching microphones, trying to figure that kind of thing. As you hover over the screen, I could hear this voice quickly reading to you kind of everything that you were hovering over.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is another way that
The
another
screen
kind of
reader.
accessibility trick.
Yes, it is. It yeah tells you what part of a screen you are on and everything. So it gives you a lot of information where you are, what you need to do, what you're typing as well when you type. It tells you each key, and then the whole word when you finish typing a word.
Hmm.
in Word, it does beep if you make a mistake, but if it's in an IDE, it doesn't tell you if you've made a mistake. So you'll get on the screen like squiggly lines underneath. I don't get that detailed with a screen reader.
Right. Yeah, that would definitely make it trickier. You need to be more precise about what you're doing.
Yes, definitely.
So, but yeah, between these kinds of accessibility techniques, between learning to read by audio, between learning Braille, you've been able to not only just get by studying computing, but you got a distinction. And then you started a master's of research and then got transferred into a PhD. You just
Yeah,
published your first research paper this year. You're currently writing your
yes,
second paper. So clearly, it is, I'm no doubt taxing to, switch these modalities and go from the way that you
definitely.
were learning 8 years ago to the way that you're learning now. But yeah, achieving at the highest level. I mean, doing a PhD, this is like, only 1% of people or something are able to achieve that in any circumstances. So yeah, you're obviously flourishing, and it goes beyond just the academic stuff. You've also taken on, your love of fitness hasn't gone away at all. So
No.
you're playing a sport called goalball.
Yeah, I haven't played it for a few years now, but
Uh,
yeah, no, it's a really great sport. Um, Very physically demanding, and, but you actually everyone's blindfolded on the pitch, and it's a 9 by 18 meter pitch. The goal behind you is 9 meters long, and there's three people on each team. The court's tactile, and the ball has a little bell in it, so you can hear it.
mm,
There's three of you defending the goal and trying to stop anyone trying to score, but you've only got 10 seconds to shoot back once you've got the ball.
oh.
So you're up and down doing like it feels like doing burpees throughout. Each half's
Yeah.
like 24 minutes long. So yeah, you're shooting back and forth so much. And oh yeah, and you're diving left, right, and center to capture the ball.
Oh wow.
Um, and it really teaches you orienteering and learn to pay attention to everything going on, where the ball is, where your teammates are, where the opposition are positioning themselves as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, brilliant game.
Oh yeah, so you can tell where the ball is because it makes noise, but how do you tell where your opponents and your teammates are based on just listening, and you can kind of tell who
You
how
roughly know the court layout as well, but yeah, you need to pay attention to where they are,
oh
make sure
my
you're
goodness.
covering the goal and not hitting them.
Oh dear, right.
But yeah, no, it's
They'd say, I didn't see you there, mate. See, see you hit your teammate in the back of the head with a ball. Wow. So yeah, so incredible. Yeah, so with all of these kinds of adaptations that we've already talked about, it's clear that blind people are able to flourish in these kinds of IT roles, computer programming roles, data science roles. Um,
it's one of the big things you've got to remember. You don't see the code running. It's all a mental model, and you don't need your eyes to have a mental model. Mm.
right, right, right. That's a really good analogy. Tim, so what's your research about? What's your PhD research about? And like the paper that you published recently, what are you focused on?
So my focus is on AI for healthcare, with a focus on respiratory conditions, mainly COPD. That's a chronic obstruction pulmonary disease. So my first paper is based on um, audio auscultations of pulmonary system, and whether we can detect or diagnose COPD out of healthy and another respiratory condition, which was in this case pneumonia. And yes, I was getting good scores on that. My research at the moment, on the paper I'm writing about at the moment, is detecting COPD severities, because there's four different levels of COPD severity depending on obstruction. So yeah, and there's is a bit of lack of data out there in the public domain. But in my research, I've managed to use two different data sets. That's the one I was previously used in my first paper. I brought into the second one to make sure I've got enough data, and I've learnt some key features of breathing in my first data set I used, bringing it into the COPD severity data set to get better features for better classification of severities.
Gotcha. So you have so these COPD patients, the data sets consist of recordings of them breathing, I guess,
Yes,
and
yeah,
the
it's of stethoscopes, recordings of their
stethoscopes.
chest and back.
And then so they have so then they have so there's through these recordings you can then apply some machine learning algorithms to be able to detect. So you have your label is kind of severity of COPD.
Yes.
So you have this kind of this quantitative variable that you can regress on and use some machine learning techniques to automatically extract features, I guess, from these audio waveforms.
So I try and create the features.
Oh yeah.
So I transform the features from what they are into a subspace of a wide range of lung sounds.
Hmm.
That helps maximize some of the dominant features I need to look for,
Hmm.
or and reduce some of the other features, and that I can just use standard machine learning techniques to then classify.
Nice. Yeah. Like random forests or that kind of thing.
Yeah, SVMs,
Support vector
logistic
machines. Yeah.
regression,
Yeah.
and yeah, so you get out some other feature or under understanding from the process.
Very cool. Sounds like a brilliant project. Like you could make a big impact with that. Is it by design or by coincidence that it's audio data, which you happen to be obviously, you've honed your audio abilities through things like goalball and obviously learning
Yes,
auditorially.
so it's just a bit of a coincidence.
Uh,
My next part will be using vision as well.
mm.
So yeah, I'll be doing computer vision next, bring in and sensor fusion techniques to help try and get better results.
So yeah, so speaking of machine learning and computer vision and that kind of thing, what kinds of ways does machine learning assist you today, and how could it in the future? So, for example, has the ChatGPT revolution of the past year has that been useful to you, or are there computer vision things, or yeah, what are the ways that machine learning is helping you out today,
Yeah.
and how could it maybe in the future even more?
So ChatGPT hasn't really helped me as much, but what has really helped me is object recognition and OCR technologies.
Right.
I use that a lot. Um, Object recognition to help me find things in shops, OCR for scanning books and everything. Yeah, it's been a real big help.
Yeah. So with object recognition, I guess you have like an app on your phone that allows you, and maybe just like headphones plugged in. And then so
Yeah,
you can be scanning shelves and it's just kind of telling you, that's an orange, not a grapefruit kind of thing.
yes,
And then the OCR optical character recognition that allows you to, I guess, in probably any circumstance, maybe similar kind of thing, just on your phone, being able to take public transport or whatever. You can be reading signs and yeah,
yes,
reading books, any of that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I use it a lot for reading books. I've got quite a few different types of scanners, book scanners, document scanners. There's even just my phone scan text so easy nowadays. Is to get it to read it out to me aloud. It's yeah, brilliant nowadays.
Yeah, I mean that's probably even relative to 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly where my iPhone kind of capabilities were 8 years ago, but I suspect that as these devices in our pockets become exponentially more powerful.
Yes,
That
definitely. You've seen big changes, especially in like in the last 5 years, where previously it could only read printed text, OCR. Hand recognition nowadays, brilliant. It's picking up a lot more. So it doesn't have to be just printed text and scanning. It can be handwritten notes. It's
right.
scan with AI nowadays.
And what about even stuff like we touched on this a little bit before we started recording? I found it interesting that you found my deep learning courses in AI Plus to be so valuable because I was like, it's interesting because I actually in those trainings, I leverage illustrations a lot because the trainings are based on my book, Deep Learning Illustrated, which, yeah, I would have, expected that maybe that my kind of way of teaching or the way that I made my book was actually maybe going in the wrong direction for you. But it seems like somehow I don't know, the descriptions of the illustrations of the visuals actually, if those descriptions are good enough, then that's
Yes,
actually makes it easier for you. Yeah.
yes, it definitely does. There's a lot of people tend to forget like the alt tags and everything, or if they do use alt tags to give descriptions of images,
Mm-hmm.
it's a description of what it is, and when it's a good description of what it contains in that image, that's very empowering. And so it's some people could put an alt tag, a description of an image like this is a photo of my brother, when they could say it's a brown haired person, brown haired, rugged, handsome looking brother, or something like that. You've
Right,
got a bit
right,
more
right,
details and descriptions.
right.
Um, but then again, there are some semantics we naturally learn in language. Which, take like banana. When you say banana, what do you think about its color, for instance? You
Yeah,
think
yellow.
yellow.
Yeah.
So when you go into shops and take a photo, you don't always get that description. It could be green, where it's ripe,
Mm,
fresh, or spotted. Some of that information some people miss in image description labels.
right.
Mm.
So yeah, that brings me on to my next question, which is how can people, so like this kind of having these alt tags be descriptive in a way where it's not just a description of the color of things, but a description of what that means. Like that like the right that it's ripe is more important than the hue of
Yes,
yellow. And so that's a good example of the kinds of things that people could be doing to be helping blind people out. What other kinds of tips do you have for our listeners who yeah could work with a blind person, maybe before hearing this episode they thought, oh, that wouldn't work, but now that they've heard this episode they think, oh, actually, okay, so, someone like Tim could work with us and be just as effective, in some ways maybe more effective, because of attention to detail and these additional ways of learning. And actually, one thing that was interesting that you described to me from your studies is that because sometimes in lectures, the lecturer isn't changing the way that they describe something, which can make it in real time more difficult for you to understand, then you go
yes,
off on your own and you learn a lot more about this phenomenon, this concept, from
definitely,
lots of different resources. So you could understand that concept a lot better than other students in the class who just heard the one
definitely.
description one time. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I would not just. It wasn't just books. I signed up to other talks. The British Computing Society, they put on a lot of talks, so I've attended to loads of those. And it's just a wide range, and it's interacting with other people as well at times, and just talking through everything. And, you develop such a wide breadth of knowledge, and you get to these points where you have this real clarity of, oh yes, I've got that, I've understood that now. And the nice feelings to reach when someone in the class might have just picked it up in one of the lectures, but I've had to go a lot further. Even just learning SQL, I think I found every single error message you could possibly think of.
Mm-hmm.
just to be able to understand what or how I needed to use the language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess, yeah, so kind of, so I think it's crystal clear that people should not, obviously, I mean, and it seems insane that I have to say this out loud, but you shouldn't discriminate against blind people. There are, there's lots of jobs out there where blind people can perform just as well or better than people with full sight. So yeah, so what kinds of ways can myself, can our listeners support blind people? Yeah, not just at work, but in general.
So I'd probably recommend if you see someone with sight loss, they still got a vision of mind, and it, it yes, it's a disability, but it's nothing which stops them. It's just we do things in a slightly different way.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm.
Crystal clear. So basically, I mean, the kind of yeah, I guess the kind of the underlying point is we don't actually need to do that much differently at all.
Yes.
Just yeah, so um and yeah, it's interesting for me just as kind of like a final point. You mentioned that ChatGPT hadn't made that much of a difference yet. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a podcast episode number 708 on the ChatGPT code interpreter, which allows you to paste in code or have it, work on code right there in the browser. And it seems to me like tools like that, maybe, as they get even better or maybe are adapted slightly to be more accessible, um, I imagine they'll be brilliant for you because they did it detects bugs automatically and fixes them, and you don't need
Yeah.
that missing space or whatever that you have to detect with your braille. It's just something that ChatGPT can pick up and fix automatically. Like you could,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, the only problem with I could see with that is it's a bit like autocomplete.
Mm.
Autocomplete completes everything, but my screen reader doesn't always announce it. So it's making changes to my
Right.
code that I don't know about.
Right.
Um,
Oh yeah. Oh
I quite
yeah.
often turn off autocomplete
Uh
on some, but then again, some IDEs are getting better. You can go down and select what options you want and everything now. So that's good. But some of the autocompletes, yeah, I turn it off. I like to know what I'm typing and what I'm doing.
yes, of course. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because I guess, yeah, something like that. Like I'm thinking, oh yeah, this code interpreter or ChatGPT is going to be perfect because it'll take whatever you wrote and then clean it up for you. But that actually could be a huge pain because then you need to kind of painstakingly have the
Go
entire
through it.
thing like read through character by character or braille character by braille character, where you're having to kind of remember the delta between what you'd put in. And so then, yeah, it can actually end up being just way more work than kind of getting it right yourself the first time around. Fascinating. All right. Thanks very much, Tim. This has been a really interesting episode, really special
Yeah, thanks
episode.
for having me.
Nice. So before I let my guests go, Tim, I always ask for a book recommendation. Do you have one for us?
Yeah, it's an audio book, Machine Learning Mathematics by Samuel Hack. Like very detailed, loads of equations in there, all inaudible, and really accessible.
Nice. And yeah, that brings up something we talked about before pressing the record button, which is how do you handle mathematical equations, Tim?
Ooh, that can be a challenging thing. OCR can be quite good nowadays, but there are some inaccuracies in it. And when you're scanning like a research paper with a mathematical equation, if it does get out the equation perfectly, it might not get out the descriptions. And so you're there, you know what values you've got, like tau, alpha, beta, but you don't have any descriptions for what they mean in that context. Next, so there's a bit of more processing with some of those. Sometimes put it into tactile format, um,
Ah.
tactile text format. I use swell paper and a thermal printer. So
Oh.
print it in black water-based ink on this special paper, and then put it through this thermal printer, and it raises any black ink up.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow. I was not aware of that. So you actually then you feel the whole equation. So it's not like Braille where it's the 8 bumps per character.
no,
It's
no,
just
it's
the shape
actual
of the whole
printed
equation
text.
and like, okay, I'm in the
Yeah,
numerator
but I have to make it a
and
bit bigger so I can fill the actual outline and everything. Because I also use it for
wow.
putting diagrams into tactile as well.
Very cool. All right. So
Mm.
if people want to connect with you or follow you after this episode, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, via LinkedIn, I'm quite active on there.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time with us today, Tim.
Yeah,
This has
thank
been an
you.
awesome episode. And yeah, looking forward to hearing how the PhD journey comes along and how your career develops after that. Awesome to be doing this AI and machine learning in healthcare research
Yeah,
and make a big impact with that. Very cool, Tim.
yeah, thank you.
What an inspiring story. In today's episode, Tim covered how he generally uses auditory learning, but Braille is essential for debugging code, while raised print is helpful for understanding math and diagrams. He talked about how he's applying machine learning to automatically detect the severity of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, from stethoscope recordings, and he filled us in on how AI tools like object recognition algorithms and optical character recognition enable blind people to live a full and independent life. All right, that's it for today's episode. Support the show by sharing, reviewing, or subscribing. But most importantly, just keep listening. Until next time, keep on rocking it out there, my friend. I'm looking forward to enjoying another round of the Super Data Science Podcast with you very soon.